I've always led a straightforward life, content with steady work and a bit of peace. My dad, who taught me everything about metalwork, showed me the value of grit and patience. Welding isn't flashy, but the pride in a well-crafted piece always kept me going. I didn't ask for much, just an honest job and a person to come home to. That person was Emily, my high school love, who I thought would be my forever. But life rarely goes as planned. Our relationship started big, with dreams and excitement, but reality had other ideas. I put in long, grueling hours on the road, doing jobs in distant towns while Emily was off at college. I paid her way with what I earned, thinking we were solid. But over time, cracks started to form, and our marriage hit a wall. One night, driving along a dark stretch of highway with the radio buzzing, I was flooded with memories of Emily and the pain of how things had turned. I switched to a talk show about ghosts, anything to keep my mind off her. But the truth was, I wasn't just leaving. I was running from the hurt. Let me start from the top. I'm Dave Cunningham. I was married to Emily for 5 years. We'd been high school sweethearts, rushing into marriage, thinking love would cover everything. I was wrong. Money wasn't a problem. I'd been welding since I was a kid, and thanks to my dad's training, I flew through welding school right after high school. I eventually moved into high-paying underwater welding, bringing in enough to pay for Emily's tuition. She's now a paralegal at a big law firm downtown. So why was I driving down that road, leaving everything behind? It all came down to the woman I thought I knew and her so-called friend. Emily used to be sweet, genuine, the kind of person who'd never hurt a soul. I loved her enough to cover her college costs, despite her folks worrying I'd go broke. But after she started working at Lancaster and Drake, things shifted. Her colleagues began to influence her, and she started going out with them now and then. At first, I didn't mind. But once a week turned into twice, then Friday nights, our date night. When I brought it up, she waved it off, suggesting we just shift our time to Saturdays and claiming she deserved a break. But then her nights out started stretching late, her calls drifting to voicemail. It ate at me until I confronted her one Saturday morning. I asked her point blank what was going on, even hinted at the idea of her seeing someone else. She denied it, claiming they just grabbed food after drinks. I told her enough was enough, and she agreed to stop going out on Fridays. For a while, things settled down, but it didn't last. Sensing something was still off, I installed a tracking app on her phone. One Friday night, I followed her to a trendy downtown bar. Inside, she was sitting with a group, and right beside her was a guy she seemed way too friendly with. Her wedding ring was nowhere in sight. When I asked her about it, she said she didn't wear it because she didn't want to lose it. The guy, Ben, stood up and smirked, introducing himself as her work buddy. He reached out for a handshake, trying to make an impression, but I wasn't impressed. I gave his hand a firm squeeze until I saw him wince. "Was just about to ask your wife to dance," he said, rubbing his hand. I turned to Emily. "Is that right?" She nodded, as if challenging me. Figuring this might be revealing, I nodded too. "Go ahead. Just remember, that's my wife you're dancing with, and I'll be watching." As Emily walked off with him, I slid into her empty seat, ordering a drink while most of the group wandered off. A woman beside me leaned over and said, "You don't own her, you know." I raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" She extended her hand. "Rachel Mercer. I work with Emily." Showed her the ropes. Her tone didn't sit well with me, and I wondered just what kind of influence she was having on my wife. "Well, Rachel, as her husband, I think I have a right to know what's going on," I said. She laughed. "Oh, relax, Dave. Emily's just getting out there a little. She's only ever known you. She needs to broaden her horizons." "Horizons, huh?" I replied, not bothering to hide my skepticism. "Or maybe you're encouraging her towards something else entirely?" Rachel rolled her eyes. "Nothing wrong with a little exploration. Could even benefit you in the long run." She smirked. "She'll learn things she might bring back to you. Don't tell me you're not seeing anyone on those long jobs?" "No," I replied coldly. "I work hard, get paid, and come home." I'd never hurt her. She shrugged, unimpressed. "Well, maybe you're the exception." "Me? I like my independence. Twice divorced. Actually," she added, flashing an amused look. Didn't think you'd be someone to give marriage advice. I shot back. Let me guess. You cheated on them? She just shrugged again. I don't owe anyone anything, she said with a smile that made my skin crawl. But Emily's got real potential if she stops letting her personal life get in her way. By then, Emily and Ben had returned from the dance floor. I stood up to let her sit between me and Rachel, putting distance between her and Ben. He didn't look thrilled, but I couldn't have cared less. So, you're a welder, Ben sneered, clearly hoping to push my buttons. What's that pay these days? $15 an hour? More like 35, I replied. More for underwater work. Enough to cover Emily's college, too. Ben's smirk faded. So, you're paying off her student loans, he asked. She doesn't have any. I covered it all. I even got her that new Subaru, I replied, not bothering to hide my annoyance. He laughed. Didn't know welders made that much. Get plenty of women on the road, huh? He elbowed me, giving me a smug look. Nope, I replied, staring him down. I work hard and take my vows seriously. Realizing this conversation was going nowhere good, I turned to Emily. Did you drive here? She nodded.
Yes.
Good. I'm heading home. I expect you to be right behind me. I stood, but not before accidentally spilling my beer onto Ben's lap. Oops. Might want to change those pants, I muttered. Ben glared, but I gave him a warning look, and he backed down. I walked out without a backward glance. Emily showed up a few minutes later, storming in the door. What the hell was that? You embarrassed me, she shouted. Oh, so now I'm the one embarrassing you? I replied, meeting her glare. Are you following me? She demanded. No, just happened to be grabbing a beer and saw you with your friends. I wasn't used to lying. In fact, I'd never done it before. But at that moment, the words just slipped out. No, I'm not following you, I said, knowing I had tracked her location straight to that bar. And yet, after seeing her laughing and acting like a schoolgirl around some guy, without her wedding ring, I couldn't help but feel ashamed. Are you embarrassed by me, Emily? Is that what this is? Her expression softened a bit. No, it's not like that, Dave. These are just people I work with. Ben and I are on the same team. And Rachel, she's a mentor at the firm. She's helped me a lot. Oh, really? I said, biting back frustration. Does that mentorship come with marriage advice? Because while you were dancing, she told me maybe you need to broaden your horizons. When I asked if she meant sleeping around, she didn't deny it. So be honest with me, Emily. Have you cheated? She looked away, her voice barely a whisper. No, I haven't. But she wouldn't meet my gaze. I leaned in, my voice hard. Emily, you know I could never forgive that. Dave, I swear, she said, finally looking up. I wouldn't do that. Not to you. We've known each other since 6th grade, Em. Have I ever broken your trust? She shook her head. No. I know you wouldn't hurt me, Dave. I love you. I really do. She paused, her voice wavering. I know you've been working crazy hours, 16 hours some days. I know you've always made sure we're taken care of, right? I said, keeping my tone steady. I've worked hard, saved up, paid the bills, even bought you a new car. I'm putting aside money for a house. So you can tell Rachel to shove her advice. She's divorced twice over for cheating, you know? Emily looked shocked. Wait, how do you know that? She told me. Seemed almost proud of it, honestly. I don't trust her, and I don't trust Ben either. They're up to something, Emily, and I don't want you dragged into it. Are you sure you're not involved in anything shady? She looked down. No, Dave. I just like spending time with them, that's all. I reached out, pulling her close. So maybe you could start spending time with me again? I asked, trying to soften the tension between us. Emily's face relaxed and she nodded, wrapping her arms around me. Of course. I'm sorry, Dave. It's all right. All I've ever wanted was to be married to you, to be the best at my work, and to build a family with you. She smiled at that. Well, you've got 2 of those. Want to work on the 3rd? She asked with a playful smile. I chuckled, kissing her forehead. Yeah, let's make it happen. That night, things felt like they were back to normal. For a few months, we settled into a comfortable routine. Emily stayed home on Fridays, and I made more of an effort to be present, giving her my full attention whenever I could. I didn't bring up Rachel or Ben again, thinking Emily could steer clear of any bad influence on her own. Then, one Friday evening, I came home to a dark house. But as I stepped inside, I noticed candlelight flickering from the dining table and the smell of lasagna drifting through the air. Emily had set out our nicest plates and silverware, and when I turned around, there she was in a dress I'd never seen before. It was short, almost too short, accentuating her legs and barely covering her back. She walked up to me, wrapping her arms around my neck and pulling me in for a kiss. "So, do you like what you see?" she whispered. I looked her up and down. "Definitely. Good," she said with a playful smile. "Tonight's a surprise. Go freshen up and I'll get dinner ready." After washing up, I came back to find the lasagna served, wine poured, and Emily sitting at the table, looking as beautiful as ever. I glanced between her and the food. "Not sure which looks better, dinner or you?" she laughed, picking up her glass. "I hope you enjoy both tonight," she replied. But as I ate, something didn't feel right. A strange dizziness crept in, and when I tried to stand, the room spun. Confused, I looked at Emily, my vision blurring, as I struggled to speak before collapsing into darkness. When I came to, I was in our bedroom, undressed and tied to a chair, my arms and legs bound with zip ties and some kind of device secured around my waist. Panic hit me hard. "Emily, what the hell is going on?" I shouted, only for her to walk in, not alone, but with Rachel right behind her. "What is this?" I demanded, struggling against the ties. "Let me out now." Rachel only smiled, calm as could be. "Oh, I think it's better if you stay put, Dave. This way, you get to watch your wife broaden her horizons." "You drugged me and tied me up? For this?" I yelled. "Yes," Rachel replied, unfazed. "Emily knew you'd never agree to it, so I gave her something to help you relax. Now, you're going to sit back and enjoy the show. There's nothing you can do." I turned to Emily, furious. "You went along with this? You know what this means, don't you?" She looked away, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Dave. Rachel says it's harmless. It won't change anything between us." "Oh, it's far from harmless, Emily, and you know it." I struggled harder against the restraints. "And what's this thing around me?" I asked, looking down at the strange device strapped across my waist. "It's a little reminder of who's in charge now," she replied, her voice turning cold. "Let me out of here right now, or this is over," I warned. Rachel stepped forward with a gag, slipping it over my mouth before I could shout again. "You'll stay nice and quiet, Dave, while Emily enjoys herself for once," she said, her smirk cutting through the haze of anger and betrayal I felt. I struggled to shake my head, to keep her from putting it on, but my strength was no match for the restraints. Rachel moved to the door, letting Ben and another guy from Emily's office enter. They both looked over at me and sneered, relishing my helplessness. Well, looks like the husband's all tied up," Ben said with a smug grin. "He's not cooperating, is he?" Rachel replied. Ben strode over and, with a nasty glint in his eye, punched me square in the jaw. Pain shot through me as I tasted blood. Emily gasped, horrified. "Don't hurt him," she cried. "You promised." "Oh, he'll live," Ben said with a nasty chuckle. "Besides, he ruined my night. Now he can sit back and watch me have his." He turned to Emily, pulling her close and ripping the strap of her dress. Hesitating for just a second, she slid off her last piece of clothing, handing it over to Ben, who threw it at me, chuckling as he did. I watched, rage boiling over as Emily dropped to her knees, her eyes meeting mine briefly before she looked away, trying to shut out my silent pleas. The others laughed and taunted, with Rachel smirking in the corner. And all I could do was sit there, helpless and trapped, forced to watch as the life I'd fought to build was torn apart before my eyes. I tried to keep my eyes shut, forcing myself not to watch. But Marie noticed, stepping closer with her phone out, recording every moment. "You like watching this, don't you?" she pressed, a smug look in her eye. I shook my head, unwilling to give her the satisfaction. Emily's time with Ben wasn't done, though. He led her over to the bed, grinning. All right, Emily, ready for the main event? I winced, hearing her laugh as they went on, the sounds twisting something inside me. Better than Dave? Ben asked, and I heard her reply, oh, yes. So much better. It was as if every ounce of love and trust I'd once had for her was stripped away right then and there. I'd heard of men who got some sick thrill out of watching their wives with other people, but I felt nothing but disgust and hatred. They carried on for nearly an hour, with Marie filming everything, commenting and laughing. Finally, when they'd finished, Ben and the other guy came over to where I was bound. Enjoy the show? They mocked, laughing at my helplessness. Then, without warning, they shoved Emily and Marie aside and turned on me, laughing as they doused me, covering my face in their foul insult. I nearly choked, sickened, as Emily stood by, laughing along with them. Ben crouched down, his face only inches from mine. Say a word, and you're done. Your life will be a living hell, understand? Emily's mine now, and I'll do whatever I want, whenever I feel like it. He grinned darkly, letting those words sink in before he and his friend finally left. Marie stayed behind, a calculating look in her eyes. If you make a scene, this is going to get much worse for you, she said calmly, then turned to Emily. Let him go after I leave. With that, she walked out, leaving us alone. Emily untied the gag and cut the zip ties, unlocking the device strapped around me. She looked like she was about to say something, but I raised a hand to stop her. I wasn't about to listen to any apology she might have rehearsed. I got to my feet, threw on my clothes, and headed straight for the phone. I dialed emergency services without a second thought. What are you doing? She asked, her voice panicked as she grabbed for her phone and keys. Calling in an assault, I said firmly, dodging her attempts to stop me. Dave, don't press charges, please. I'll go to jail, she pleaded, her face pale with panic. I met her eyes coldly. Trust me, jail is the safest place for you right now. Go get dressed. The cops will be here any minute. You don't know what Ben and Marie will do. They'll come after you, she warned, voice trembling. I stayed calm, only repeating, get dressed. She finally stopped trying to fight me and walked back to the bedroom. As she changed, I felt her phone buzz in my pocket. It was a message from Marie. Everything okay? I replied, typing carefully, everything's fine. He's not thrilled, but he'll get over it. I sent the message, hoping Marie would buy it. By the time Emily came back, a patrol car had pulled up. I opened the door, letting the officers inside. They scanned the room, picking up on the tension right away. I gave them my account of the night, and one of them radioed for an ambulance while the other pulled Emily aside to take her statement in a different room. After discussing what had happened, the officers came back, and Emily emerged in handcuffs, her face a mix of shock and tears. Please, don't let them arrest me, she begged, voice shaking. It was all supposed to be a joke. I looked away, unable to even bear the sight of her. As more officers arrived, along with the paramedics, they escorted Emily out. A female officer explained to me that she was being taken in on charges of illegal detention, assault, and harassment. She turned to me with a sympathetic look. We'll need to take you to the hospital, she said, to run some blood and urine tests. We need to confirm if any substances were used against you. I nodded, understanding that every bit of evidence would help in the case against them. She handed me a card for a DA's office contact and suggested I file for a protective order as soon as possible. In the ambulance, they checked me over, and as soon as we arrived at the hospital, a nurse took my samples and gave me something to ease the pain. I'd barely begun to relax when a woman in a business suit entered the room. Dave Cunningham? She asked. That's me, I said, trying to sit up straighter. I'm Lisa Morano, the assistant DA assigned to your case. How are you holding up? I've been better, I replied, rubbing my head. She nodded, pulling up a chair. I'm going to seek a protection order for you. But just so you're aware, there's a chance the suspects might get released pending their trial due to their connections. Do you think a protection order will be enough? I asked, already knowing the answer. It'll help, she said, but nothing's guaranteed. I nodded, accepting that this might be far from over. I'll handle whatever comes, I said. She gave a brief nod of approval. Also, You might want to consider hiring a divorce lawyer unless you're thinking about staying in this marriage. No, this is over. I'll take care of the legal side as soon as possible, I replied, not hesitating. I was kept at the hospital overnight since my apartment had become a crime scene. The next morning, my parents arrived. I told them everything, sparing none of the details. My father's face darkened, fists clenched with anger. "So what's your next move?" he asked quietly, though I could hear the tension in his voice. "Divorce," I said without a second thought. "Good," he said. "I'll help you find a lawyer." He also offered to take me home when I was discharged, which I appreciated. Later, Emily's parents showed up at the hospital, looking shell-shocked. Her father pulled me aside, shame and sorrow written all over his face. "I don't know what to say, Dave," he said, his voice shaking. "Are you planning to divorce her?" "Yes," I replied, looking him in the eye. "There's no going back after this. I'm so sorry for what she's done," he said. "If she needs a place to stay, she can come back home with us." I thanked them both, grateful for their understanding in such a mess. After they left, the doctor finally discharged me, and my dad arrived just as they were finishing up the paperwork. Once I'd gotten my instructions, he wheeled me out to the car, and we headed back to my apartment. My dad helped me up to the door before heading off. "Call if you need anything, all right?" he said, giving me a quick hug before leaving. Inside, I could tell the police had gone through everything for evidence. But one thing caught my attention, a message flashing on my answering machine. I hit play and heard the garbled voice, "You're dead meat?" It was a recorded line from some old Rocky movie. The number had been marked private, but I had no doubt who'd left the message. As I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling, the doorbell rang. Peeking through the peephole, I saw a brunette standing outside. I recognized her from that night at the bar, one of the people with Ben and Emily. I took out my phone, activating the camera, then cracked open the door with the chain still on. "Yes?" I asked, keeping my voice firm. "Mr. Cunningham?" she asked in a soft, almost rehearsed tone. "That's me. And you are?" "I'm Holly Branson. I work with Emily. Can I come in?" She glanced around the hallway. "Are you alone?" I hesitated. "Are you alone?" I asked, trying to gauge Holly's intentions. "Yes," she said, nodding quickly. Cautiously, I unchained the door and let her in. She was tense, clearly anxious, and before I could ask, she handed me a manila envelope. "What's this?" I asked, turning it over. "Please, just open it," she whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. I took it into the kitchen, slipping on a pair of gloves before carefully opening the envelope. Inside were photographs, grainy, dark images of a man bound with his hands behind his back. He was dead. My heart pounded as I looked at her. "Who is this?" "It's my husband, Brian," Holly replied, her eyes welling with tears. "They ruled it a suicide, but I know that's not true. The firm I work for has influence, too much influence. They own pieces of the local police and even some judges." My mind went to Jake. Did Jake have anything to do with this? She shrugged, a haunted look in her eyes. "I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ordered it." "Why are you still working there?" I asked, unable to hide my suspicion. "I don't have a choice," she replied, her voice breaking. "I'm trapped." I looked at her, the truth dawning on me. "You're not just a legal secretary, are you?" She shook her head, a mix of fear and resignation in her expression. "My husband tried to stand up to them, and that was the result." "And Marie?" I asked, finally piecing things together. "What role does she play?" Holly hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor. "She's like a handler. She's in charge of assigning us duties for the attorneys and their clients." "And Lucy?" I could barely bring myself to ask. She nodded. "Marie was grooming her." Then I noticed a folded note in the envelope, the words cut from magazine clippings. "Back off, or this could be you." I showed Holly the note, and she looked at it with a blank expression. "Did you read this?" "No," she said softly, glancing away. "I found it on my doorstep this morning with instructions to hand-deliver it to you. Will you testify?" I asked, knowing how much I was asking of her. Holly shook her head. "I'd rather stay alive, Dave. You don't understand how ruthless these people are, especially Marie." I exhaled, trying to wrap my head around it all. How many people know about this at the firm? She sighed. Everyone at the top. Thank you for bringing this to me, Holly. I'm so sorry for what you've been through. I walked her to the door. She smiled faintly. You're a good guy. Lucy's lucky to have you, she said, though her words were tinged with sadness. Thanks, I replied, watching as she left, carefully checking to make sure she wasn't being watched. Once she was gone, I locked the door, my mind racing. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. It was a fight for survival. I stopped the video I'd been reviewing and grabbed my phone, dialing Linda Calloway's number. Linda Calloway speaking, she answered. I filled her in on the message, the photographs, and the note Holly had brought me. Her tone turned serious. This changes everything. Bring it to me now, she said, giving me her address. I realized I needed to leave town for a while. Quickly, I packed a bag with essentials and grabbed the reminder cage Lucy had used on me. I added a few welding tools, just in case, and called my boss to request time off. He agreed without question, saying I had plenty of vacation days built up. After double-checking that I'd packed everything, I locked up and headed to Linda's place. When I arrived, she looked shocked as I handed her the photographs and note. I also have a video of my conversation with Holly, I told her. Let's see it, she said, watching intently. When it finished, she leaned back, stunned. This explains a lot. Can I get a copy? I let her transfer the file from my phone. Then I remembered Lucy's phone, which I'd taken the night Ben attacked me, and handed it to her. What's this? She asked, surprised. It's Lucy's. I thought it might hold something useful. She nodded, slipping it into a bag. I'll have it analyzed. If what Holly says is true, we may need to bring in the state or federal authorities. It sounds like local law enforcement is compromised. What are you planning to do next? She asked, looking me over. I'm leaving town for a bit. Just keep me in the loop. I will. Be careful, all right? With that, I headed back to my truck, unsure where to go but knowing I had to keep moving. I withdrew as much cash as I could, checking my surroundings to make sure no one was following me. The haunting images of Holly's husband lingered in my mind, a reminder that if I wasn't careful, I could end up the same way. Late that night, I dialed an old friend. The familiar, gravelly voice answered on the other end. Yeah. Hey Dave, it's Stan. Stan, my man. What's going on? Got a bit of a situation. Think I could crash at your place for a few days? He let out a low chuckle. Of course, buddy. Just bring a couple of six-packs with you on the way. Will do. See you soon. Feeling a bit of relief for the first time all day, I stopped at a convenience store to grab a few supplies. Beer, ice, coffee, and a pack of cigarettes, Dave's brand. He'd appreciate the gesture. He was letting me stay. After all, Dave Brolin was a few years older than me, someone I'd met through my dad's welding business. He'd taught me a lot over the years, becoming like an older brother. Dave had gone through his share of hardship, especially when his dad passed from mesothelioma after years of shipyard work. His sister, Beverly, had been their mom's caretaker until her passing from cancer just last year. Beverly was sweet, like family, though I'd never thought of her as more than that. I was nearing Dave's place, mind racing with everything that had happened. Now, my life had become something I barely recognized, and yet I knew there was no turning back. I had one thing on my mind as I arrived at his door. Seeing this through, no matter the cost. It had been years since I'd last seen Beverly, and I was genuinely curious to catch up. Dave had been through a rough divorce himself, after discovering his wife with a coworker, and he'd never remarried. These days, he looked out for Beverly, who was living with him now. I arrived at his place around 2:30 in the morning, hauling my bags up to the porch where he was waiting. Hope you brought beer, he joked, grinning as I handed him the smokes. Of course, I said, following him inside, where a blonde in pajamas was coming down the stairs. Who's the blonde bombshell? I teased, raising an eyebrow. Are you serious? She shot back, rolling her eyes. It was Beverly, fit, confident, and nothing like the girl I remembered. Beverly? No way, I said, taken aback. Yeah, genius. What are you doing here at this hour? Did Lucy kick you out? She asked, but her tone softened as she saw the bruises on my face. Oh, Stan. What happened? That's why I'm here. I replied, setting down my bags. Dave nudged my shoulder. Let's grab some beers and you can fill us in. I grabbed 3 beers and passed them around, even joking with Beverly about how she'd changed over the years. She playfully flipped me off but smiled all the same. Once we settled in, I told them everything about Lucy, Marie, Jake, and Holly's warning. I even showed them the video Holly had recorded. They sat in stunned silence. Dave finally broke it. Damn, they have no idea you're here, right? No, I checked. I don't think anyone followed me. Good, he replied. Out here, we'd see anyone coming up the hill. And I still have the weapons your dad gave me years back. You remember how to shoot, right? It's been a while, I admitted. Haven't touched a weapon in years. No problem, he said with a smirk. We'll get some practice in out back. Bev's a decent shot herself these days. She flashed a mischievous grin. So, does your dad know you're here? Dave asked. No, I didn't tell anyone yet. I should probably call Linda, though. I didn't decide to come here until I was already on the road. Good idea, Dave said, nodding. And turn off your phone. Take the battery out, too, just in case it's been tracked. I followed his advice, powering down the phone and removing the battery. Lucy's arraignment is Monday, Beverly chimed in. Think they'll keep her without bail? I hope so, but with her connections, I'm not sure, I replied, thinking back to everything Holly had said. Dave clapped me on the back. Well, you're welcome to stay here as long as you need, man. I've got a job in about a week, but feel free to stick around. Just relax and make yourself at home. Thanks. I took 2 weeks off, so hopefully things will be a bit clearer by then. If you need anything, just say the word. Dave smiled and then nodded toward Beverly. She'll keep you plenty entertained, but you're our guest, so enjoy it. Beverly yawned, stretching as she got up. I've got to be up early to make breakfast. Hope you like omelets and hash browns, she said with a wink. Sounds perfect, I replied, watching as she headed upstairs. Once her door closed, Dave and I stepped outside for a smoke. So, what's Beverly's story? I asked, realizing how much had changed. He took a drag on his cigarette. Honestly, she never found the right person. She's had a few boyfriends, but none of them measured up. Measured up to what? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Dave looked at me seriously. To you. She's had a crush on you forever. Wait, really? I asked, surprised. Dead serious. The only reason she never told you was because of Lucy. Heck, I've even heard her say your name in her sleep. He chuckled, but I felt a bit awkward. All right, that's a little too much info, I replied, feeling my cheeks flush. He smirked. Well, it is what it is. I mean, she's always been good-looking. You just had your eyes on Lucy. Yeah, I guess I did, I said quietly. He nodded, giving me a gentle warning. Look, if something happens between you two, that's fine with me. Just don't mess her around, okay? She's been through a lot, and she's always had feelings for you. I nodded. I'm done with Lucy. That's a promise. Good, he said, putting out his cigarette. I'm just saying, be straight with her. He went back inside, and I followed, feeling exhaustion finally catching up to me. I barely remember my head hitting the pillow before I was out. The next morning, I woke up to Beverly's voice calling, rise and shine. It was already 8:30. After a quick shower, I took off my wedding ring and left it on the dresser, finally letting go of the past. When I made it downstairs, Beverly was at the stove in a loose t-shirt and cut-off shorts, her hair tied back. She looked, well, incredible. Smells great, I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Help yourself to the butter pecan creamer. Just save some for the rest of us, she teased with a wink. I joined Dave at the table, who was already engrossed in the paper. Morning, I said. Morning, he replied, barely looking up. There's an article here about a lawyer getting arrested. Could be related to your case. I skimmed the article, but it was light on details, so I handed it back. Just then, Beverly brought over breakfast, and I couldn't help but smile after the first bite. This is amazing, I said. She grinned. Glad you like it. After breakfast, Dave got up to head into town. If you need to call the DA, just use the house phone, he said, grabbing his keys. Thanks, I replied as Beverly handed him a list. He winked at her and headed out, leaving us alone. You need help with the dishes? I offered. Not necessary, but I wouldn't mind the company, she replied, tossing me a towel with a grin. As I dried the dishes, she noticed my bare finger. I see you're not wearing your ring anymore. So you're really going through with the divorce? She asked, a hint of approval in her tone. Yeah. I told Lucy I wouldn't put up with cheating, and I meant it, I replied, my voice firm. Good to see you've still got some backbone, she said with a small smile. Then she changed the subject. So, what about you? How've you been? Really? I guess I'm holding up, I replied. What about you? Anyone special in your life these days? There was someone once, she admitted, her eyes softening, but he was already taken. I stayed home to take care of my parents, Beverly explained, her voice soft but with a hint of sadness. Yeah, I heard, I replied, nodding sympathetically. After Dad passed, I worked as a waitress to keep us afloat, she went on. Then when Mom got really sick, I stayed home full-time to take care of her. I'm sorry you went through that. I don't regret it, she said with a small smile. Just hope someone will be there for me when I get to that age. So, what happened after your mom passed? I asked. We had to sell the house to cover all the expenses. Dave let me keep what was left, and I moved in here with him, she said. He even offered to pay for me to go to college, but I didn't want to take his money. Why not? I asked, surprised. I want to make it on my own, she replied. Right now, I'm working at McDonald's and taking business courses in the evenings. Good for you, I said, admiring her determination. Dave's still talking about starting his own fabrication shop, she said. He wants me to handle the books. Still on about that, huh? I chuckled. You think he'll ever go for it full-time? He might if he can get everything set up. He already does custom work for people around here, and he's making decent money from it. It's his dream. Maybe he'll show me the shop while I'm here, I replied. He'd like that, she said, smiling. For a moment, we fell quiet, and I found myself looking at her in a way I hadn't before. She caught me staring and raised an eyebrow. What are you looking at? I think I'm looking at the most beautiful woman I've ever met, I told her honestly. She blushed, glancing down. Stop teasing me. I'm not. I mean it. You've been through so much, taking care of your parents, working to put yourself through school. I just wish I'd seen it sooner. Well, you had Lucy to distract you, she said, smiling softly. True, I admitted. Once the dishes were done, Beverly dried her hands, giving me a serious look. Stan, you know she used you, right? I sighed. I think you're right. Beverly shook her head, her frustration obvious. I could see it years ago. Why didn't you ever say anything? You wouldn't have listened. She had you wrapped around her finger, she replied, a hint of irritation in her voice. All I wanted was to make her happy, I said, my voice quiet. Look where that got you, she said, her voice rising. She got her degree, a new car, and everything else on your dime. Then, when she was done using you, she dumped you. I'm glad she's in jail because if she were here right now, I'd give her a piece of my mind. I couldn't help but laugh a little. I believe you would. She crossed her arms and gave me a hard look. I need to know one thing. What's that? Are you going to fall for her tears and take her back? No, I said, shaking my head firmly. I'm done with her. Good, she replied, visibly relieved. Just remember that. Then, without any warning, she pulled off her shirt and tossed it aside, stepping closer to me. Her hands wrapped around me as she kissed me passionately. I kissed her back, and before I knew it, we were making love right there in the kitchen as the morning sun poured through the windows. When it was over, she whispered, I love you, Stan Shipman. I always have. Don't forget that. I love you too, Beverly, I said, still breathless. I could stay like this forever. That sounds nice, she said with a grin, but I doubt Dave would appreciate it. She laughed, and I kissed her again. Then a thought suddenly hit me. Wait. Realizing I didn't use protection, I pulled back, feeling a twinge of worry. She smiled, reassuring me. Don't worry, I'm on the pill. Honestly, I wouldn't mind if you got me pregnant. I'd love to have your kids. I exhaled, relieved. I'll hold you to that, We should probably clean up before Dave gets back, she said, standing up and stretching. I need to start prepping the meat for tonight. Sounds good. What's the meat for? We barbecue every Sunday if the weather's decent. You like venison, right? She asked with a grin. Yeah, but it's been years since I've had it, I said, returning her smile. Good. I shot it myself with Dave's old flintlock, she replied proudly. You're full of surprises, I laughed. That flintlock has to be, what, 40, 50 inches long? 49, she said, smirking. Patched round ball with 100 grains of powder. I even cast the bullet myself. Damn, I replied, genuinely impressed. How about fishing? You like fishing too? Love it. I bait my own hooks and clean my own catch, she replied, clearly proud. Is there anything you don't do? I teased. She laughed. Well, I haven't rebuilt the transmission in Dave's truck yet, but I did help him redo the engine. I shook my head, laughing. I'm definitely in love, I said, kissing her again. She grinned, nudging me toward the stairs. Now go grab a shower. I'll be up in a minute. I headed upstairs and jumped in the shower, letting the hot water relax me. Just a few minutes later, Beverly slipped in beside me. She leaned close, a teasing smile on her face. Just wait until tonight, she whispered. By the way, you're sleeping with me from now on. My bed's bigger than yours. Won't Dave mind? I asked, grinning. Not at all. We're both adults, Beverly replied with a wink. After our shower, we got dressed and went downstairs. I need to call the DA and let her know where I am, I said, glancing at the wireless phone Beverly pointed to on the counter. Use that one, she said. I dialed, realizing just in time that it would be a long-distance call. Linda picked up after a couple of rings. Linda Calloway here. Linda, it's Stan Shipman. Just calling to let you know where I'm staying. Stan, I was beginning to worry. You're calling from out of town? Yeah, I'm staying with an old friend and had to power down my cell for security reasons, I explained. Understood. Keep me posted if you move around. And on a good note, the feds have started an investigation into your wife's law firm. Also, I went ahead and got you a top divorce lawyer in the area. Hope that's all right. Perfect, thanks. I appreciate that, I replied, jotting down the details she provided. She's expecting to hear from you tomorrow. If anyone can help you through this, it's her, Linda added. She promised to keep me updated on Lucy's arraignment, and we wrapped up the call just as Dave returned from the store. I helped him carry in the groceries, and he gave me a reassuring nod. I talked to your folks, he said, setting down a few bags. They were getting worried, so I told them you're safe and staying with us. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate that. That evening, we grilled the venison Beverly had prepared, enjoying the meal out on the deck. Afterward, while Beverly cleaned up the kitchen, Dave and I stepped out for a smoke with a couple of beers in hand. He gave me a knowing look. So, I'm guessing you'll be staying in her room? I shifted uncomfortably. Given that Bev was his sister, the question wasn't exactly easy to answer. Yeah, I think so, I replied, trying to keep it light. Dave's face turned more serious. Is this a temporary thing, or? No, it's not. I love her, I answered confidently, meeting his gaze. He nodded approvingly. It's about time you got your head on straight, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. Bev's a big girl, and she can make her own choices. Just don't break her heart, all right? I'd never do that, I promised. Glad to hear it. He gave me a grin. Welcome to the family, Stan. We shook hands, and he pulled me into a bear hug. Then he laughed. Just don't keep me up all night. Okay? I chuckled, nodding. I'll do my best. Later that night, after Beverly and I made love, we lay together, her head resting on my chest as we drifted in comfortable silence. I hadn't felt this kind of peace in a long time. What's on your mind? She asked softly. The future, I replied honestly. She propped herself up to look at me. Where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? Nothing too complicated, she said after a moment's thought. I want a husband and a family. A simple life. That's enough for me. What about all those classes you're taking? I asked, curious. They're mostly for Dave, she replied with a soft smile. He'll need help with accounting if he ever gets his business running full-time. I nodded. I'm like you, I guess. I just want a faithful wife and a family to come home to. I thought I had that with Lucy, but it was never really there. She gave me a gentle smile, reaching up to touch my face. Well, as long as you come home to me, I'll be happy. I know what to expect with your work, Stan. I held her close, feeling a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. I wish I'd met you before Lucy. Me too, she replied. But we're here now. We'll get through all this together. I love you, I said, leaning down to kiss her. I love you even more, she whispered, her arms wrapping around me as she held me tight. That night, I fell asleep feeling a deep contentment I hadn't known before. The next morning, Beverly was up early to make breakfast. She gave me a quick kiss before heading to work, reminding me she had a class after her shift. I'll be home around 9:30, so you two fend for yourselves, she teased with a grin. I love you, I said, touched by her thoughtfulness. Love you too, she replied, waving as she left. Dave came down shortly after she left, giving me a friendly nudge. No kiss for me? He called after her. She laughed, giving him a quick peck on the cheek. Stay out of trouble, she called as she headed out the door. I glanced at the clock, realizing it was a good time to call the divorce lawyer Linda had recommended. Dave gestured toward the phone, and I dialed. Law Office of Bernice Goodwin, a friendly voice answered. Hi, I'm Stan Shipman. I believe Bernice is expecting my call. One moment, please, she replied, transferring me. After a few seconds, a woman's voice came on. Bernice Goodwin here. How can I help you? Hi, this is Stan Shipman. Linda Calloway passed along your information. Yes. I've been expecting you. Normally, I prefer in-person meetings, but I understand things are complicated in your case, she said. That's fine, I replied. We can handle it however you need. Good. So, why don't you tell me everything? She asked, her voice calm but focused. I explained my situation from the beginning, detailing Lucy's betrayal, her connections, and the current legal issues. Bernice listened intently, letting me finish before she spoke. What outcome are you hoping for? She asked. No alimony and a fair split of our assets, I said firmly. We can aim for that, she replied. Your wife's legal troubles will work to your advantage. Now, do you own any property? No, we rent, I said. All right. And would you like to pursue any legal action against Marie and Jake? I'd recommend going for emotional distress rather than alienation of affection. It's usually more effective. Do whatever you think is best, I replied. All right. I'll send over the necessary documents, including a contract and a checklist. You'll need to sign and return them, and we'll also need a retainer fee. Can you manage that today? Yes, I confirmed, ready to move forward. Good, Bernice replied. Once I've filed everything, we'll move fast to have the papers served. Any questions? Nope, I'm all set, I replied. Her assistant then took my credit card info for the retainer. After hanging up, I checked my email and found a few documents from Bernice's office. I signed the contract, sent it back, and went over her detailed advice on securing my finances. Following her instructions, I opened a new account and transferred half of our savings into it. Then I paid off Lucy's card and canceled it, leaving only mine active to cover any further legal fees. By early afternoon, I'd taken care of everything and decided to join Dave at a nearby shop where he was helping out a farmer with some trailer repairs. The work was steady and kept my mind busy. Then around 3, Dave's phone rang, and he handed it to me. It's your lawyer. Stan Shipman here, I said, bracing myself. It's Linda Calloway, she replied, sounding tense. Bad news. The judge set a low bail amount, and they let your wife and her friends go. I felt my stomach drop. How is that even possible? They probably pulled some strings, Linda said, frustration clear in her voice. You still have the protective order, but you know it only goes so far. For now, stay put. The feds are keeping an eye on them, but your safety isn't fully guaranteed. Got it, I replied, feeling an unsettling mix of anger and worry. After hanging up, I turned to Dave. They posted bail. They're out. He cursed under his breath. You should call your parents. Give them a heads up, just in case. I nodded and dialed. My dad answered on the second ring. Dad, it's Stan, I said, keeping my voice steady. I wanted to let you know, Lucy and her group are out on bail. Just be on guard. They might try to get to me through you. Don't worry, son. Your mom and I won't tell them anything, he replied, but something in his tone gave me pause. You already know where I am, don't you? I asked, the realization dawning on me. If my parents knew, it was likely Lucy and her friends did too. My gut told me they might already be there. Yeah, Dave filled us in, he replied, his voice sounding strained. Thinking fast, I played along. Actually, I'm about 50 miles south, staying at a motel. All right, he replied, sounding oddly relieved. Just keep in touch, okay? Can I speak to Mom? I asked, hoping to confirm if anything felt off. She's, in the bathroom, he stammered. The oddness in his voice raised my suspicions. All right, tell her I love her. I will. Take care, son, he said, before quickly hanging up. Feeling a chill run down my spine, I immediately called Linda. I think Lucy and her crew might be at my parents' place, I told her, my voice tense. All right, I'll send some agents over right away. Do not move from where you are, she said firmly. After the call, I told Dave about my suspicions. If they're there, they're probably looking for me. I hope the story about the motel throws them off. Stay put here, Stan. I'll go have a word with the sheriff and check if we need more help around here. Don't move, Dave replied, his tone serious. I nodded, but the thought of Lucy and her group roaming free didn't sit right with me. A couple of hours after Dave left, Linda called back. You were right, Stan. Lucy, Marie, Jake, and some hired thugs went straight to your parents' place. They tied them up and tried to scare them into giving up your location. We've got one of their men in custody, but he's refusing to talk. Any idea where they're headed now? I asked, feeling a fresh wave of dread. They're still trying to track you down. Here, talk to your dad, she said, passing the phone. My father's voice came through, shaking but calm. Stan, they didn't believe the motel story, but we're okay. I think they're coming your way. My heart raced. What makes you think that? I overheard Lucy talking. She said they'd try to flush you out, he said. Thanks, Dad. Be safe, I replied, before Linda came back on the line. Where exactly are you, Stan? She asked, her tone urgent. I gave her my location and asked if Lucy could realistically find me. It's possible, she replied, but we'll get officers to you ASAP. Stay put. I left the shop, heading back to the main house, trying to keep calm. As I turned the corner, a familiar voice stopped me cold. Well, thought you'd get away, did you? Jake sneered, holding a weapon. Behind him stood Lucy and Marie, their SUV parked a few yards away. They looked smug, as if this was some twisted game. Jake motioned with the gun. Move. Now. I had no choice but to follow, and Lucy slid in beside me as I climbed into the SUV, her smirk infuriating. You know this won't end well for you, I warned, keeping my voice steady. Oh, it won't end well, all right, she replied coldly. But it's going to be too late for you. They drove me out to a secluded creek bed, forcing me from the vehicle. Jake's hired thug bound my hands behind me, shoving me down to my knees in the dirt. I looked up at Jake as he pulled out a long, menacing sword, standing over me with a cruel smile. Make your peace, he said, raising the blade. I closed my eyes, barely managing a quiet prayer. Suddenly, a shot rang out, and when I opened my eyes, Jake lay on the ground, blood pooling from a bullet wound square in his forehead. Another shot cracked through the silence, taking out the thug holding me. Marie shrieked, reaching for Jake's gun, but a third shot struck her in the shoulder, sending her sprawling in the dirt. Lucy cowered behind Jake's body, terror spreading across her face. A moment later, a four-wheeler approached, and I saw Beverly riding toward us, rifle in hand, her blonde hair streaming in the wind. She jumped off, rushing over to cut me free before marching straight to Lucy. Beverly's face was pure fury. She raised the rifle and struck Lucy hard with the butt, knocking her back. Don't ever touch my man again, she spat, her voice filled with anger, or I'll make sure you're gone for good. Lucy, bleeding and trembling, nodded frantically. Beverly glared, then drove the rifle into Lucy's knee with a force that made her scream, the sound of bone cracking echoing in the creek bed. Sirens sounded in the distance, and Beverly grabbed a flare gun from her four-wheeler, shooting it high into the sky to signal the authorities. As the flashing lights drew closer, she turned to me, her expression softening. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice a stark contrast from the fierce woman she'd been only moments before. "I'm all right now," I replied, still shaken by everything that had happened. "Bev, you saved my life. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "Trust me," she said, giving me a warm smile. "You've got the rest of your life to make it up to me." Before long, the area was flooded with police cars. Dave arrived shortly after, pulling up fast in his truck and hurrying over to check on us. "You all right?" he asked, his face tense with concern. "I am now, thanks to Beverly," I said, feeling a deep wave of gratitude as I glanced over at her. She really did save my life. The sheriff and his deputies took control of the scene. They called an ambulance for Marie, who was still writhing in pain from her injuries, and the coroner to handle Jake's body. Lucy, meanwhile, was handcuffed and led away, though not before shooting me one last hateful glare. Marie began sobbing, her voice a mix of anger and desperation as she looked from the paramedics to the sheriff. "She killed Jake, and Ronnie too," she wailed, tears streaking down her face. The sheriff stayed calm. "Nope, this is private property, and under the castle doctrine, Miss Brolin was within her rights to protect Mr. Shipman's life. You're lucky she didn't do more damage." As deputies loaded Lucy and Marie into separate squad cars, the sheriff turned to me. "They'll both be charged with attempted murder and conspiracy. With the evidence we've gathered, along with your statement, we're looking at a solid case." Once the police had collected all the evidence and the bodies were removed, Beverly and I climbed onto her four-wheeler and rode back to the house, with Dave following us in his truck. When we parked, I turned to Beverly, still amazed at how she'd come through for me. "I thought you had classes today," I said, unable to keep the awe out of my voice. She grinned. "Dave stopped by McDonald's and filled me in. I clocked out, came back here, and just followed the tire tracks right to where you were. Got into the deer stand. And well, you know the rest. I owe you everything, Bev," I said, my voice full of emotion. She shook her head and hugged me tightly. "You don't owe me a thing, Stan. You're here and safe. That's all that matters." Inside, I called Linda to update her. She sounded relieved. "Now we've got them exactly where we want them," she said confidently. "The firm's about to go down for good." "I hope so," I replied, feeling a weight lift. Afterward, I called my parents, who were equally relieved to know that everything had ended safely. Over the next few months, everything fell into place. Marie eventually recovered enough to stand trial alongside Lucy. Both were charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, and other crimes, including illegal detention and assault. They were found guilty and sentenced to life, with no chance of parole. For the first time in ages, I felt a sense of peace, knowing they'd never be free to harm anyone again. With Bernice finalizing my divorce, I was granted a fair settlement, while Lucy was left empty-handed. Bernice also secured a generous sum from Marie and Jake's estates, leaving me with more than enough to start a new chapter. The firm itself was hit hard. Federal charges of racketeering and involvement in suspicious deaths shut it down for good. Within 6 months, all of the partners faced life sentences, and Beverly and I had more than enough to live comfortably. With the future finally looking bright, I bought a ring and proposed to Beverly on one knee. She squealed and kissed me, and we married a month later, spending our honeymoon in Las Vegas. When we returned, we sat down with Dave to propose a new business idea. "Dave, how about we partner up to start DNS welding and custom fabrications?" I asked, unable to contain my excitement. "Are you serious?" he replied, eyes wide. "Absolutely," I said, grinning as Beverly pulled out a spreadsheet. She'd been working on a business plan behind the scenes, and together, we went through every detail. After studying it closely, Dave gave an approving nod. "You know, I think this could really work." "Oh, one more thing," I added, pulling out a set of keys from my pocket. "You know that lot on the south side?" Beverly tilted her head, curious. "Yeah, the one with the new double-wide on it? I thought you'd sold it." I shook my head, smiling. "Nope. It's your wedding gift from me and your parents." The lot and the home are in your name now. Her eyes widened, and she looked genuinely stunned. I don't know what to say. That must have cost a fortune, Stan. Just say thank you, partner, I replied, holding out my hand. With a big smile, Beverly shook my hand and then pulled me into a bear hug. Are you sure you'll be okay living there by yourself? She asked, a hint of concern in her voice. Believe me, I'll be just fine, Dave said, chuckling. Besides, I might finally get a quiet night's sleep without hearing you too. We laughed, and later that night, I called my parents to thank them for their help with the gift. After we moved in, Beverly and I christened the master bedroom of our new home, and as we lay in each other's arms, I felt more confident than ever about our future. As for Lucy and Marie, prison wasn't treating them kindly. Forced into the lowest ranks, they scrubbed floors with toothbrushes and did favors for the other inmates just to get by. I guess in the end, they really did get to broaden their horizons